Hi guys, it's Bella and welcome to Beauty on a Budget. So 1970 to 2020, 50 years. How have things changed for me in 50 years, and do I think things are all better now? I mean, there's the saying, we often say in the good old days, but were they good old days? Were they? What do you think? Do you think life is better now? I know in 1970 in the UK, quite a hard time. Living was quite a hard time. There was a lot of strikes. The unions were really ruling the country, and there was a lot of strikes, and there was a lot of blackouts because the miners were on strike. So there was no coal, so there was no electricity, no generators. So we were all in blackout, and sometimes you just sort of be walking along the street and everything would go out. You'd just be in complete blackness, which is something that wouldn't happen now. We don't see now. In a lot of ways, yes, it was the good old days, and in a lot of ways, it's better now for me, and I think for my country. But what do you think? And I'd love your opinions. I thought what I would do is go through a few things of the 70s and a few things of our current decade, and sort of compare really life for me. Okay, so 1970, I was 15 years old. I had dreams, I had plans, and they were all going to happen. They were all going to work. It was all going to go exactly as I said. I was a hard worker. I was left school then. I'd gone into college, and my plans were to, study, to make the most of my life. And of course, I was going to meet Prince Charming. I was going to meet the perfect man, and my life was going to be okay. My biggest thoughts was that it wouldn't end up, my life wouldn't be like my mother's. I loved my mum dearly, but we lived with a very violent man, and she was very scared most of her life. And even then in the 70s, even though it's only 50 years, women didn't have what they've got now, didn't have the power behind them that they've got now. The woman mostly was still the housewife. Not all, few women actually worked. It was mostly, the husband went to work and the wife had the dinner on the table when you get home and got the children ready, and very sort of traditional old-fashioned way of life. And it still was like that in the 70s, at least here. And I would watch my mother sort of every day, being there and taking care of this man that had absolutely no regard for either of us. And my determination was that I wouldn't live like her. I loved her. I respected it was her life. And if it had been now, I'd say to her, what are you doing? Why are you putting up with this? But the 70s was quite different. There wasn't the separation there is now. There wasn't the support behind women that there is now. So looking back, I guess I can understand her. I loved her very, very much. But we still lived in fear. And I was determined that that would never happen. That whoever I married, whoever I decided to spend my life with after I'd done my studies, after I'd made some sort of life for myself, would be a decent, respectable, nice, kind, wonderful, totally devoted man. That was my plan. Now in the 70s, by 1975, I was 20. And from 70 to 75, I guess I did a lot of growing up. 15 to 20, you do, don't you? You do a lot of growing up. And I did a lot of growing up in that time. I did the college thing and I did the party thing, and I was in a group and I sang and we went around bars singing, and I had a normal average teenage life. I had different boyfriends and just a normal life. I stayed out as much as I possibly could because of the circumstances at home. And I was okay. So the circumstances that I lived in, because when you actually live in them, you don't know any different. You don't know any better. Just that I just knew I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want to live under that fear of a man. But it was life to me. That was how I was born and brought up. I think the one thing that I decided, and we are going back 50 years, and I appreciate life is very, very different now, that I was going to be a good girl. I had a lot of boyfriends. Between 1970 and 1975, I had a lot of boyfriends. But I wanted to be a good girl. And I always wanted to save myself for the one. You all know what I mean. Because some did back then. It was just important to me to be appreciated and to have that one special love in my life. I always wanted that one dedicated, special love in my life. And in 1975, I thought I'd met him. And in 1977, I married him. And then I had my 2 children, 1980 and 1982. And it turned out that although I was totally dedicated, and I was naive, I was under the impression that if you give someone your all, if you give everything you've got to that one person, then that would be reciprocated. But it wasn't. Now, I do believe that he did care for me at one time. He did care for me. But he ended up being somebody quite different. And I don't want to go into all those gory details with you. Most of you that know me know that, I've been married before, but it shattered my dreams. It shattered my plans that I'd had from a very young girl, very naive plans, but it shattered those plans. And it shattered my illusion that there was someone out there that was going to be as dedicated as I was. And appreciate me as much as I appreciated them. But it wasn't to be. And that came as a shock. That came as a huge shock because I didn't have a plan B. I didn't think, right, if this doesn't work out, if I got married and it didn't work out, I would. I didn't have a plan B because as far as I was concerned, when I said forever, I meant forever. And yeah, it was probably one of the biggest shocks of my life that didn't work out. By 1985, towards 1990, I would say my life was dedicated to bringing my children up. And I loved it. I loved bringing my children up. And it's probably strange to say 1980s is probably my favourite decade. Although it started off incredibly unhappy, I loved being a mum, and I still do. And for all the plans that I had at work and all the plans that I had for my future and studies and what I'd become, my heart has always been to be a mum and a wife. The wife part didn't work out, but being a mum. And I loved raising my children, and I loved being there for all their all the circumstances they went through in their life, and a very hands-on mum, and I love it. And my favourite occupation has always been to be a mother. And then by 1989, 90, I decided I would go to night school and do at-home courses to go into management position. And I thought I'd further my education. I'd try for myself. My children were at school. So I did. I started to study, and I did a couple of night courses, evening classes, and my mum used to come round and look after the children. And I worked my degree, and I got a degree in personnel management. And I was quite proud of myself. So I was always sort of capable. I was always capable of bringing my children up. I was always, capable to get qualifications. But it's what my heart felt. I never let go of that unbelievable shock that life wasn't going to be what I thought it was. Life wasn't going to be that easy. And that you did get disappointed. No matter what you did, no matter how you tried, you would get disappointment. And I would say the 90s, without doubt, was my worst time, in the sense that although I loved my children, although my life was my children, and by then I'd got some part-time work. I worked when they was at school as a personnel manager, and it was a good job, so I was able to do well by my children. But the person inside, the person that put her head on her pillow overnight, still fought and still had a wall that had been built brick by brick so that disappointment never happened to me again. So that I was never hurt like that ever again. And that lasted years and years. And it grew with bitterness. It grew with anger, resentment. And a lot of those things really took my life over. Although the outside shell, I'd say take my heart over. Because the outside shell, you'd see a functioning mum, my job. I kept a lovely home. So the outside shell to the world, to the outside, it looks, fine. My life looks fine. Got to take the children on holiday. And 1992, my mum phoned me, and she was making muttering sounds, and I knew she'd had a stroke. I could tell by the way she was talking she had a stroke. We went straight to her house. She only lived 3 streets away from me then. And an ambulance, and we went to the hospital. And I said, is this permanent damage? What's happened? How's she going to be? Is she going to be all right? I was tearing my hair out. My friends had my children. And the doctor came out and he said to me, it's not a stroke. It's a brain tumour. And all I could see at that time was how often her head was hit, how often she'd cry, and the life she lived, and the bitterness and the anger in me at that time absolutely just completely took me over. I was frightened to have friends, because what would happen if I had a friend? I couldn't trust anyone. I had to be really, really careful, because I'd be hurt. And through me being hurt, my children would be hurt. So no one was allowed in. And the 90s, to be perfectly honest, the 90s pretty much went on like that. The 90s were hard because the 90s, I'd say I was on automatic pilot. And the biggest thing that worried me is that my children would feel that. My main goal was that my children didn't see what, you know, the anger that was inside of me. I wanted to keep that and protect them. But yeah, I'd say the 90s was my worst decade. As I say, my mum died in 1992 and she was in hospital, and she was in hospital for 6 weeks before she died. And in those 6 weeks, I spent all day at the hospital. I sat by her bedside the whole time. And she couldn't talk because of the stroke, but she was, you know, she knew what she was saying and thinking, and she could write and, you know, everything down. And I would talk about my past, and I'd talk about things we did as a kid and when I was a child, you know, and funny holidays and building sandcastles and all silly things that I was thinking of when I looked back, you know, and church. My mum was, we would go to church, and I spoke about all those things, you know, with her. But it opened up more things that I'd suppressed. It sort of confirmed all the memories and the things that I was feeling. And it took me a long time to get over my mum's death. And then the rest of the 90s was just, all I felt was protection, was having to guard, was having to watch, was having to never allow myself to be that vulnerable to anybody ever again. There was relationships, I had relationships, but nothing permanent. I certainly would never give my heart to anybody else. There was always, I did have a few relationships, honestly, but it was always that little, although I would give 90% to somebody, 10% was always held back. Just in case, this is a safeguard. That was my guarantee. That 10% was my guarantee that next time it's done, I've got this safety valve. So no one ever took the way my first husband did, that I totally believed in. I knew always that this could turn on a coin, this could turn. And that distrust is not very good for a relationship. I was never one of those people that thought, oh, he's seeing somebody else, or he's doing this, or he's doing that, because that's not my nature. But just the overall security of being in a relationship, I never trusted it. And I always kept my own person back, you know, for protection. And it's quite hard to live like that, because although you get hurt, if you wear your heart on your sleeve, you get hurt. You do get hurt. But you also get hurt if you don't. You also get hurt if your life is 24/7 being guarded, like I did, because I was happy with my children, I was happy with my work, I was happy with my home. But I wasn't happy with me. I wasn't happy with me for a long, long time. It's funny because, you know, the children came to me one day, and, you know, that the daddy's getting married again, and it was hard. And that was like 20 years afterwards. 20 years afterwards, but it was still hard. Even after 20 years, it was still hard. It was still hard. I don't feel in any way that I still loved him, but it was just, I don't know, confirmation of a dream that didn't work, or I don't know. I know I was still upset even 20 years later. So we reached 2000. My daughters are 18 and 20 now. both went to college, both very, very clever girls, both have going into good jobs, although Rebecca was still studying. So 1995, my daughters were 25 and 23. Emma had a relationship with a boy that was a family friend that we'd known for years, and she was besotted with him. He was her first real love, and he's still her love today. You know, those years later, they are still very much in love, and they have my wonderful grandson, who I'm so, so proud of. So that was settled. They were settled. My youngest daughter was 23. She was then working. She was an interior designer. She went to college for that, and had a very good business. And I was very, very proud of them both. And I am still to this day very proud of them both. But that left just me. That left me. And there was a feeling that I was redundant. I felt kind of redundant because I'd done what my job was, what my heart's desire wanted was to bring my children up to the best of my ability, and I did. And I think I did a good job, and if ever I pat myself on the back for anything, it will be that. I think I did a good job with my children because they are lovely women. They're great girls and they are lovely women. So, yeah, so that's definitely was a bonus for me. But by 95, I got more into work. I worked full time then, and of course my children weren't around, so I went back and studied at the company that I worked for. I went to their head office. I was personnel manager in a particular store, and then I went to their head office and I studied. I got a few more examinations and I started to train personnel officers. So I worked in their head office, and when new personnel managers come along, I would work with them for a little while to make sure that, you know, they were working as the company required and that they had what it takes to be a personnel manager, because that's sort of a skill in itself, really, dealing with people and knowing what to say and when to say it. So yeah, I was quite happy going along on my own. Again, I had serious relationships, and I was never a one-night stand girl. That I've never been that, and that's probably because I am a prude, and I am a prude, yeah. Maybe it's my age, maybe because of the age I am, I know life is very different now. And you know, when my children talk about hooking up, so hooked up with somebody. What do you mean hooked up? You know, just spent a couple of nights. What? I am still a prude. Honestly, I am still a prude. It's still, to this day, that side of life is for somebody special, in a special relationship. I'm still like it, honestly. Even now, and I know I'm old-fashioned. But I had friendships and relationships, and it got on to 2000, beginning 2000, and that went through the 2000, 2005, and then in 2007, I came up to where I live now for a friend's wedding. A friend was getting married. One of my old trainees, girls that I trained. She was getting married, and she lived up here. She'd moved up here, and I came up for the weekend, and I got bought a room for the night and a couple of nights. And the night before she got married, or the night before that, we all went to a bar and we had pub food, for a hen night, and we had pub food, and it was all along the bar. And I looked up, and there was this guy standing at the end of the counter. And my friend said to me, he keeps looking at you. And I said, oh. So he does, he keeps looking at you. Well, I was like 50 by then. I thought, no way, no. And I thought, he does look nice. He was so shy. He looked so shy because every time I looked at him, he'd look away and he'd blush. And he was with a couple of friends. And as it dwindled down, us girls, obviously a hen night, so we were all sitting round still talking and gabbing and, you know, having jokes as you do on a hen night. And him and his friend was still there. One of his friends was still left. And somehow my friend got him to talk to me. I mean, it was silly. It's like children. We were like children, honestly. You think 50-year-old woman, I'd know how to conduct myself a little bit better than this. Oh, I can't talk to him, you know. But we started talking. It sort of got closer and closer. Good evening, you're from here and so forth. And then he came over and he said, can I hear a southern accent? Can I hear a London accent? And I said, yeah, you know, I've come up and down south from down south and why and so forth. And we spoke and we sat talking to really quite the early hours, really. We were in there for a long time. And just talking and chatting. He was telling me about himself, that he was divorced and that he had a son and that lived with him, and they'll tell him I've got daughters, and we were just talking amongst, you know, between us. And the others were all around the table. We were just sort of talking together, and this other guy was talking to someone. And Colin, his name was, he was just talking to somebody. And at the end of the night, he said, well, we're going, it's really nice meeting you. And he said, if you ever want to talk, he said, I'd love to talk to you more. And he gave me the phone number. I said, I live a long, long way away. And I give him my phone number and my email address. And at the time, there was something called MySpace. It's not there now, but I think MySpace went. But it was bigger than Facebook at the time. It was bigger than Facebook. And give each other's our MySpace addresses. Anyway, I've been home about a week, and the wedding went lovely. It was lovely. I didn't think too much about it, but I did every now and again. He was such a nice guy, you know. And after about a week, he got in touch with me in MySpace, and we used to talk on MySpace, and we spoke on there and on the telephone for 6 months. 6 months. And it's funny, but when that's the only way of communicating, you know, we talk, we'd have the webcams on, so we talk, you know. But when that's the only way of communicating, when you can't go out to dinner, you can't go to the theatre, you can't, that is it. You learn about each other quickly, because that's all you can do is chat and share things and, you know, sum each other up. Probably quicker than you could if you were going on romantic evenings, you know. So 8 months we did that, and we spoke, and, you know, once a week, twice a week, and every day. And I just really liked him. I really, really liked him. The fear was still there, and I don't know, something dawned on me that if I'm never going to know if I don't let this bitterness go. If I don't let this shield that I've built round myself go, I could lose so much. Yes, it might not work. Yes, it might backfire on me again. But what if I didn't try? You know? What if I didn't try? What would I be missing? So he'd come down to London and we meet up, and I came up here a couple of times, and we just decided to make a go of it.